Hello and welcome back to Chatbot on Robot Republic with me, Josh or Riku. Today I'm joined by another special guest because I'm here with Daniel from Appa's Papa, who have been developing a really amazing pixel art related RPG called Theo's Quest. I almost buggered up the name in the intro there. How wonderful. Hello, Daniel.
Hi, Josh.
How are you?
Good, good, good.
Marvelous. So we're going to be talking about Theo's Quest, which is a brilliant pixel art related RPG or pixel art RPG with some slightly intriguing gameplay mechanics and some really cool kind of like story and narrative devices and stuff. Can you tell us a little bit more about the game before we hop into the questions?
Sure. So, Theo's Quest is, oh my gosh, how to describe it? It is an adventure card battler. So it's a very odd hybrid between like a Pokemon-like turn-based battle system layer on top with some cards, like a card battler, and just a very light deck building element within an overworld that is mostly inspired sort of like by Steven Universe Save the Light sort of game. So it's a lot of point and click adventure with focus on mental health narrative and just believing in yourself.
Which is absolutely brilliant. And I know that kind of like the parts of it that we played were really, really cool. I genuinely loved it, and I'm a bit of a sucker for pixel art games as it is. So obviously, first question is, where did the inspiration for Theo's Quest come from?
So for me, the inspiration, well, okay, so this is my very first game, and I started out with like 1,000 different ideas. But a lot of them basically did center around the idea of a card game because I actually grew up playing card games. That was like what my family does all the time. We just sit around for hours and would play like rummy or spades, hearts, poker, blackjack, anything, just card games.
Yeah,
And so I have always grown up playing cards. I love cards and I love then video game card extensions. I've also grew up with a ton of like RPGs. Um, Predominantly Final Fantasy. Well, let's just go with anything out of Square Enix, predominantly. Um, and so basically, what I ended up doing for my first game was I was like, okay, I started asking. I was playing a lot of Pokemon at the time, and so I was asking myself, like, what would it be like if you had a single starter? Like, what happens if you just had Bulbasaur and you were forced to go through the whole game with one character? And like, how would you bond it? And then essentially, I took all of these different interests that I've had, card games and RPGs and Pokemon, and that question, and then I decided, like, well, this is one answer to it. And one answer would be, well, what if you were a witch that summoned a spirit? So that's your one thing. And then, okay, if you're a witch, maybe you deal for cards, tarot. Oh, so then, and it just turned out that tarot has a whole host of like symbolism and like
yep,
everything is set out in such a wonderful way that I could just take tarot as tarot is and completely just translate it. For me, the entire game just wrote itself by researching tarot.
yeah. And there is so I mean, anyone who's played any of the Persona series games will also be very aware of how you can basically structure 90% of your game around
The Fool's
tarot.
Journey.
Yeah, you can literally focus it around the full journey and stuff because and there is so much stuff there. Um, kind of, and that leads me quite nicely into my next question. Because obviously, like you've mentioned that card games have been a huge inspiration along with Pokemon and stuff. And then obviously, kind of the narrative and the world building and stuff came from researching the tarot. Um, was the kind of idea of like the tarot cards, the imagery, and all of that sort of stuff, a always going to kind of like be there as a major point in terms of both gameplay and narrative, or was that one of those things where I'm going to use tarot, and then you started doing more research, and then you were like, well, actually, that develops this area of the narrative, and that does some world building over there, and it'd be really cool to have an area focused around that particular aspect of tarot.
It actually was started with the idea of tarot. So like I settled on witchy, which then kind of led into tarot. And literally the second I came up with tarot and the tarot deck and like battling with tarot cards,
Mm,
I decided I wanted to try to make the entire game based on that. So like from the very beginning, once the inspiration was set on tarot, I then just took tarot. like
Yeah,
the idea of tarot, and made it. So I was like, okay, so there's four suits, so there's going to be four towns, which also as a first game helps keep it small instead of like say the
yeah,
eight towns in Pokemon. So it just like was instead of making a giant scope game, like Pokemon, it was able to cut it in half and just focus on your four suits, a story. Um, I wanted all the moves were based off of it. I can at some point show you the design doc I had for it.
oh, that'd be
Um,
awesome.
I wanted everything to completely tie into the narrative. So the theme, and I that's how I wanted to design all my games is you have a
Yeah,
theme. So the theme in this one was believing in yourself and tarot. So that theme obviously then gets carried literally everywhere. Like
yeah,
the moves, the characters, the places, what they do, all of it was just taken from tarot.
and I can suppose actually that having that central, that kind of, that it almost becomes a pillar to your entire game once you've got this theme and you're like, right, so my theme is going to be, believing in yourself and tarot. That becomes your kind of almost your tree trunk, and then everything branches off of that and stuff. That's a really amazing, that's a really excellent way to kind of like approach game design and stuff, because I know there's such a multitude of ways to approach it.
Yeah, and I truly that did help. And that's why this next one that I'm already working on is based literally on the pillar design is on empathy. So that's the key
Wow.
word. How do we make a game to basically explore empathy?
Ooh, that's a really, and that's quite a kind of challenging thing actually, because empathy is,
You have to
we
have
all
imagination.
have empathy, but a lot of people don't quite fully grasp what it is at times, and it's quite a complex. It's a very complex. I'm trying to think of the word now. Wow, this just looks horrendously unprofessional when I can't think of words, but it happens regularly. It's fine.
It
Um,
is it's a complex scenario. Like empathy is
yeah,
something that like I read something somewhere about some essentially empathy requires imagination.
yeah,
And unfortunately, I think imagination and the arts and everything is something that in our current has been downplayed
mm,
more and more and more and more and more. And a consequence of that could be this is all at that. But like if you've got less imagination, you have less ability to then imagine what
yeah,
it's like for the other person to be in their shoes.
yeah. And we're all capable of empathy in various ways, but I think you're right there actually, in having games that, because video games are now the biggest form of media on the planet. They Video games as an industry makes way more than film and television. Um,
Because it's interactive. You as the
yeah,
person get to decide your narrative. You're not just hearing passively somebody else's story.
yeah. And actually having games that explore these kind of more complex issues, I think, is really excellent use of gaming and stuff actually. And it's something that we've had people on the show before who have talked about using games to raise awareness around mental health issues, as well. And I think there's been a big shift in the last few years with everything that's been going on, globally, to actually
Yes.
bring a little bit more light into the fact that actually we can tell these quite focused, personalized stories in an interactive way that actually allow people to build these skills up.
It's a hope, and
Yeah,
that's sort of truly for Theo's quest. A hope on that was the discover it was a for people to come out of that thinking like, wow, tarot doesn't have to be something scary or occult or
mm,
evil. You literally can use it as a tool to help myself. Like, so I still to this day just grab my deck and ask questions and do a three-card draw.
yeah,
I'm not looking for answers as if it's truly telling me something. I'm just trying to get an idea to approach
yeah.
something.
And sometimes that's all you need as a person, especially if it's a big, challenging decision. That sometimes just having that kind of,
Outside.
yeah, that kind of
It's all random, but
external cosmic kind of, forces, that kind of that way of justifying it in your head, that actually, okay, yeah, it's completely random, but actually makes me feel a bit better that the randomness of the universe is somehow pointing me in that direction. It's kind of quite say kind of satisfying and quite nice to kind of have that realization.
And also every suit, and I'm sure we'll get to this at some point for questions, but another part of inspiration and like my goal for the game was that was to go for us to help people out who maybe haven't, because I've gone through many years of therapy. So part of this game was also to help other people go through. So every master, when you beat them, tries to impart some sort of wisdom that I have learned through therapy onto you based on what that suit is about. So
Wow,
like
that's
swords tells you just to like um be aware of your thoughts, and emotions tells you like, well, everybody has an emotion and it's literally just a physiological change and how then like it's a
mm,
physiological change, but it can't do anything to you. So just feel it and experience it and accept it. Coins is like just relax, like look
yeah.
around, enjoy the present. It's what's right here. Um, and I think wands is the option of trying to be mindfulness.
Yeah.
That's the lesson that the wands master tries to teach you.
I think it's that's really nice. Thank you for sharing that as well. Actually, that your kind of own things that you've learned that have helped you in life have been translated into a game. I think that's really lovely, actually, as well. And
Yeah.
to people watching, if you have struggled with any of these things, then give this game a punt because there is some brilliant, brilliant stuff in there that might help.
Hopefully, right?
Yeah,
And the
hopefully.
most fun, just have fun. That's the biggest
Yeah,
thing.
and it is a really fun game. It has got this really important message tied to it, but it is also a genuinely lovely game.
Oh,
And I
thank
loved
you.
it. And I loved it mainly because of the story and the characters, but also, which is my next question, and that was a really nice, smooth segue there. Um, which is the art style, because the game is it's pixel art, it's colorful pixel art. How did you land on that particular style of approach to the game's aesthetic?
So I originally, there's so many beautiful tarot card designs out there, right? And they're all beautifully drawn. And so the original design was to maybe work with, I found this one person and they're an independent artist. I think they're from some Southeast Asian country. I don't
Yeah,
want to say Indonesia to be rude, but anyway, so I found this one person and I really, really liked them. And their art is gorgeous. And they were doing like a collaboration with somebody else for this tarot art. And I just was like, oh my God, this is beautiful. So I started by reaching out to them and we were maybe going to like do this, like a collaboration thing. And I was
yeah,
going to commission them to do all the art in this absolutely beautiful, sort of like watercolory, um, think sort of Hollow Knight-esque, but not
yeah,
so dirty color, think of it bright and
yeah.
watercolor and beautiful. So it was going to be originally that was going to be the idea for the whole art design. But the biggest thing was that like I'm an indie person alone who had quit my job to as a research scientist
Wow.
to do this. So I know hard career shift.
I was gonna say.
Yeah, getting my PhD burned me out and disillusioned me. I just wanted to be a teacher. And that all fell through the cracks. So I am now making video games. But anyway, so
I
the part of
mean,
that,
what a career to jump into.
right? It's much better. I enjoy. It's the same principles as like everything I learned from a PhD, I was able to apply
Yeah,
to making the game, and so I'm sure that's why it wasn't that difficult for me to be able to. I mean, I've already done like a 5.5 year project
yeah.
like before, so the idea of a 1.5 year project was relatively easy.
Mm.
I say that, but I was my biggest challenge. Anyway, so the art style, beautiful, and I reached out and I wanted it, but the problem is it's just me. We don't have a lot of fun. We literally have no funds. I wasn't going to try to Kickstart or anything. I just wanted to make the game and put it out there.
Yeah,
So basically, what ended up happening was I needed to draw it. Um, because I didn't want to spend a lot of money, and we technically then basically compromised by commissioning out for music instead, because I definitely couldn't do music. So I opened up like MS Paint, like I did as a kid, and
yeah.
just started playing around, and was like, "Oh, this is really pretty. I can do this. I can do pixels, especially if you keep um
Grid on. Is it the grid thing?
the canvas size,
That's the one.
very tiny. So
Yes.
we had, I wanted it to be 16 by 9. So I literally just multiplied it by 10 and said it's a 160 pixel by 90 pixel canvas.
Yep.
It. And so the whole game was done low res. And then for color palettes, so I love the look of pixel art. I obviously grew up with pixel art games because I'm 34. Um, and la 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 la. Oh, but when you open up, say, Asprite, and there's a ton of color options, I just got like panicked.
Yeah.
So constraints are great for me at least. So I was like, okay, it's going to be pixel art, check. But I only want a handful of colors. That way I don't have to feel like paralyzed in trying to do shading and coloring and learning all this, like a whole new skill art
Yeah.
that I'm not really comfortable with. Because really the only physical art I can do is not can do, but I can do well is charcoal, which again is like a blurry thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, so um, I decided I went on to lowspec.com. They have a bunch of palette lists for pixel art, and I actually near at the time had recently played Gato Roboto. That's a 1-bit game,
Yeah.
uh, and they have a whole bunch of color palettes that you can swap as unlockables, which I thought was always such a great way to hide extra for a
Yeah.
1-bit game. It's just color swapping your
Yeah.
palettes. So anyway, they have a bunch of really cool palette schemes, and basically I literally went through and just ripped 8 colors from those palettes because I already knew that they obviously work together because the
Yeah.
idea is that they work together as 1-bit. So I took from every set I pulled out and I would pull like one light color or a dark color
Yeah.
from one of those and then built up basically 4 lights, 4 darks and said, here's the palette. And then I just started playing around. And when I modeled it originally after Final Fantasy, so I did like a white mage as my first mock-up.
Yep.
Um, and it looked pretty good. And so I was like, I guess I can draw.
That's awesome. And
So I did it all.
yeah, and to be fair, it's just growing up in the the 90s and early noughties and stuff, we used to spend hours. I remember when I was a kid, I used to just open Microsoft Paint. We did it. Sounds really bad actually, but when I was at school, meant to be paying attention in lessons, my friends and I would open up Microsoft Paint and we'd just create a little we'd zoom right in so you could see the individual pixels
Little
and you just
pixels.
create little bits of drawings and stuff. And the teachers would be like, "Why are you not doing work?" And we'd be like, "Sorry, we're doing some art stuff."
And hey, art is
Lo and
work.
behold, lo and behold, nowadays there's a renaissance of pixel art games and it's a useful skill.
Actually, did you learn the Alt Tab thing when you were in school?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
The most
Alt Tab
important
was a
thing.
lifesaver.
Yeah. The most important thing you learn in IT as a kid in the
Alt
90s,
Tab.
the noughties was Alt Tab.
So that when the teacher walks by, you go click, I'm
Bam.
doing work.
Yep. I actually got taught that by a trainee teacher.
Wait, really?
I accidentally said, "Oh, you can really quickly switch between them by pressing Alt and pushing the tab button," and we were all just kind of like, "Oh, can you now?"
You're gonna regret saying that.
That's pretty much it. It's like, "Oh,
I
you
think
don't
my
seem to have done much work. I'm a
father
little
taught
bit
me.
stuck."
I yeah. Um, MS Paint, I just loved doing it. I love seeing individual pixels. There is something beautifully just kind of therapeutic
Hmm.
about being on a constrained XY grid and
Yeah.
only being able to place in squares.
Yeah.
I just love it. It
It
makes
is.
it easy for me.
And it is, and it's just, well, that moment once you spend hours working on all these little sketches and you zoom out and you look at the whole thing and you just kind of go, "Oh, that looks quite nice.
Yeah, you're just like, oh, I did
I like
good.
that. Oh, that is good."
And what's
Uh,
truly nice about pixel art, especially low-res pixel art, is just a handful of shading
yeah.
literally can make it just opens up and it lets you practice a lot of the basics of
Mm,
art. So just basic composition ideas. I ended up having grid lines on my canvas that I would use,
yeah.
where I split it up into the golden thirds
Wow.
so that I knew like where, so I would place things obviously in my thirds so that
Yeah.
all of my scenes had that pleasant unbalance of like the middle, wide 2/3 middle being open, and then you have stuff around on the outside to
Yeah.
draw your eye either over, up, down.
Wow. That's really awesome. And actually, the implementation of that actually is really quite a nice way to kind of make sure that you've got specific focal points in a level. So because and we can all think of a studio that may or may not be AAA that has very, very cluttered video game screens.
What do you mean?
Um,
All of them? Okay, not all of
yes.
them because I'm playing Ghost of Tsushima right now.
Fantastic
Oh
game.
my God.
Oh,
The
it's a gorgeous
idea of
game.
literally using the environment as your HUD,
Yep. I
mind
know.
blowing and
The,
beautiful.
the first time I played it and it was like, this wind thing is going to tell you where to go. I was like, I don't
Jaw
have,
dropped.
I don't need UI clutter.
Yeah, I just
What
get to enjoy this beautiful world you
and it
made.
is, it's such a gorgeous world. I mean, I could spend hours. I mean, to be fair, if you haven't read it yet, people that are watching, there is an article on my very lengthy review talking about Ghost of Tsushima because I just fell in love with that game and it is just absolutely gorgeous.
It's
Um,
space, yes.
yeah, so yeah, if you've
Feudal
not,
Japan Breath of the Wild, if you
yeah, basically, yeah,
haven't played it,
with
so try it.
some of the most gorgeous stylistic choices ever. But obviously, we're here to talk about your game,
My game, sorry.
not one that not a beautiful game that we both love. But if you have yet to play it and you're having an hour about Ghost of Tsushima, go and check out my article on robot-republic.com because there is a really good article on there. Not to my own horn or anything, but yeah. Um,
I would agree. It's a good game. Check out the article. I
um,
haven't read it, but I will.
oh, thank you very much. Um, thinking about so go back to the game. You mentioned that Pokemon, the kind of like classic kind of Pokemon games, the battle style and the turn-based stuff was a big inspiration. How did you kind of decide on that more traditional turn-based system? Was it just a case of Pokemon is one of my main forms of inspiration, so a turn-based battle seems to make the most sense, or was it a case of I'm taking inspiration from Pokemon games and turn-based battling actually kind of fits well with the overall theme and tone of the game that I'm going for?
Surprisingly for that, I didn't have that high of a level of thought for it. So it was more on first point. I'm taking Pokemon as an idea base. I've played so many Pokemon games at this point. I'd already dissected out the stats, how they
Yeah.
work, why things would happen, like what's the basic idea of the math involved to get it all done. Like it was something that could be easily approachable by me by having
Mm.
things like only two, like an attack, like magic and physical, and then for attacks and defense,
Yeah.
and then a stat for accuracy, and then an attack for speed. And like it just was something that I could basically take, deconstruct, and use it for myself very easily.
Mm.
But also, technically, being a card games are built on literally the idea of I go, you go, I go, you
Yeah.
go, I go, you go. So turn-based just naturally fits into the theme of tarot in a card game.
That's a really That actually makes sense, and it's quite nice to hear that actually it was kind of that mixture of Pokemon along with the kind of standard card game kind of trope and stuff. Because there are some really good deck builders out there where it's turn-based, but there are also some more intriguing ones that are not so turn-based, which is kind of
And
interesting.
they're interesting, but I've played a lot of like the during grad school,
Mm,
I played a lot of board games with like my cohorts, and when we would go to like retreats and things. And I've just realized from playing them that like physical games now can get really complicated
yeah.
really fast to a degree
Mm,
that I didn't quite like. Once you got it, it was fun, but the onboarding
yeah.
is hard. And so the further you go from a turn-based, like where you have the time to think and plan and you do just you,
Yeah.
the more onboarding you have to do. And I already struggled hardcore with this game alone, how to tutorialize players into the idea of like
Yeah.
you're going to have two phases of your turn. You have a card phase and you have a move phase, like
Yeah.
your traditional Pokemon move phase. So you have to think of like two things. And that was a big challenge to figure out how to do that.
Yeah, I bet. And actually, to be fair, like I can onboarding is because we with the industry there is a trend in the industry at the moment. Actually, we're moving away from the standard old school tutorial level, and it's going to be more focused around actually putting the players inside the game and more of a how we get the players to use certain things. And there are some really, really good examples out there. I know that, the short chunk of this game, the short chunk of tarot that I played, I thought the onboarding process was really nice because I was sitting there when it was like, and there are two when it came up and said there are two forms there are two moves in your kind of like turn. I was like, oh no. I was
Like,
like,
oh no, this is gonna get hard.
I've got to do more than one thing. I'm going to get so confused. But actually, the onboarding process is so smooth that even to someone like me who I love playing Pokemon, but the second you add an extra step into it, I suddenly go, what? Not gonna lie, I'm not a stupid person, but sometimes my brain just kind of doesn't quite get there quick enough, and I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing. Um, but I found with Theo's quest that the onboarding sequence was really nice and really smooth. And if a numpty like me can grasp how to play this game and enjoy it, then I would say that you've done a really good job.
Thank you. Yeah,
You're
I
welcome.
it went through multiple iterations.
Yeah,
The biggest thing was every time I play, and hey, for other indie devs out there, play testing, play testing, play testing, play testing. Get people to play your game because that is how I figured out most of. I thought that I had. I don't know. I might be. I don't know. I shouldn't say that. Anyway, I'm something, not neuro nor typical. We'll say it that way.
yeah,
And I thought everything was completely clear. And you hand it off to anybody else, and instant feedback would be, "What the fuck
yeah.
is this?" I'm like, I thought this was clear as day. Um, it's a that was the biggest help in getting me to figure out like how to tweak my on the tutorializing because
Yeah.
when people first started playing, everybody would just be like, "It seems great, but I have no idea what I'm doing."
And that's
Ouch.
when you sit there as a dev and go, oh bugger.
Yeah. So, yes. That's when you're like, "Oh, I'm not doing my job. I've got one job and I'm not doing it."
Yeah. You say that, to be fair, when you're a dev, you are, as a
Everything.
solo dev like yourself, you are literally everything. You are UI and UX, design, implementation, animation, artwork, everything across the game. So you sit there and go, I only have one job. It's a bloody big job that's normally done by a team of
Yeah,
people.
but to be honest, I can't imagine doing it any other way. Uh,
No, I can
the
imagine it's
freedom from going from like academia to being able to do everything on my own when
mm,
I feel it and how I feel it.
yeah, there's a level of really quite beautiful freedom in that, actually, I can imagine.
Scary,
Um,
but good.
yeah, absolutely. Because I suppose it's like all things, isn't it? You do these kind of projects as a kind of leap of faith kind of thing,
Yeah,
and
oh
just kind
well,
of,
you have to believe in
yeah,
yourself.
exactly. And that's a really nice way to segue both into the main theme of the game and my next question, which is the game has got a fantastic narrative. Um, Obviously we've talked about kind of having this central theme based pillar. How did you go about the narrative aspects? I mean, obviously we've talked a lot of it's been heavily influenced by the kind of the mythology and legend stuff around the tarot and stuff, but how did you kind of approach that process? Was it kind of, because I know I've spoken to several devs, and some of them are like, I have a wall covered in post-it notes. Some of them are like, I've got a spreadsheet. Some were like, I've got a whiteboard and stuff. How did you go about getting and kind of like transforming? I can see a notebook there.
I have a notebook, and from the very beginning of the notebook until ah, here. So all of this, which is almost the entirety of the notebook,
Wow.
is just this is my little Theo's Quest Bible.
Yeah.
So for the narrative aspect, all of it was done. Just I started writing. I mean, I originally started using some Google Docs, but I didn't want to always be on
A screen.
uh yeah, on a screen.
Mm.
And so I grew up before computers. Well, at that weird time where you were mixing with computers. So, I like to do things on paper. So what I did is I don't know, it's kind of hard to see. I'll just hold up this little teeny tiny bit. So this says like probably
Yep.
first trio revisited, and it's just a whole bunch of text. And so, for the narrative, I started with the idea of, okay, I'm going to use the major arcana as uh, as a gameplay element to
Yeah.
change spirits' form. So that's how you can get away with basically having one Pokemon, like your
Mhm.
spirit,
Yep.
but the freedom to then explore lots of different styles as that spirit will change what it can do based on whatever major arcana you play. And so then that's a gameplay mechanic. How do you implement that as a story
Yeah.
element? Well, I'm like, well, then you have to earn them, and that's the deck building, and that's your complete reward as a player for
Mhm.
playing through the game and progressing is to earn these majors. And so that then naturally led to the I of just taking the Fool's Journey, which is what the major arcana is, which
Yeah.
just basically describes almost the same thing as the hero's journey.
Yeah.
It's going from the Fool's Journey can describe any aspect that is a cyclical nature, which is most of our lives. So that can be a day. It can be, in the case for Theo, it's her quest to build her tarot deck. Um, it could just be an event.
Yeah.
Literally anything that has beginning and end, ta-da, can be a fool's journey. And so what I did was I then just broke down and I said, okay, well, why would the player earn like what does the magician mean, and
Yeah,
why would the player earn it? And so I made it for that example, the player earns the magician by doing the magician is all about creativity and being able to create new things, and
yeah,
it's the very first card besides the fool. Um, so I thought, well, when you do your first battle, you'll get your magician. And then when you do your first reading, which is all about like, the deeper mysteries,
yeah.
intuition, that will be when you earn the high priestess, which is all about mysteries, deeper intuition, all that. So when you meet the main antagonist and sort of like secondary protagonist, Charlie and Jules, you earn lovers.
Nice.
And so that's just how I went through.
Yeah,
So that's what this was I went through, I listed every single, that's how I designed the story was I listed every major, and then I just asked, well, how or why would
yeah.
somebody earn that on this journey of going between each town
Wow.
and dueling the masters. And so that's how I built up the narrative of the whole
Yeah.
story.
And at the same time, that kind of links in to working on actually like gameplay mechanics and stuff as well, because then actually you're thinking about, well, okay, so if that's how you're going to earn the magician, how is that going to translate into a gameplay mechanic, and what's that going to kind of look like from a gameplay perspective and stuff? That's a really brilliant. That's a really interesting way of actually approaching narrative design, actually, and kind of linking that with broader game design.
Yeah, I'm a big so technically Theo's Quest is my second game. So the very
Mm,
first game I did was a thing called Side Quest, and it got 80% completed. The whole game is technically you can open and up the Unity project and play through it from beginning to end. It doesn't have enemies, and like cutscenes and stuff are not truly in there, but the world was built and all of the mechanics were built, and that I didn't finish it because what I learned from that was to put gameplay first. I
yeah,
unfortunately started with a story and tried to make a game based on this cool idea of what if you were an NPC? What if the whole game was about being an NPC in a village?
yeah,
And the hero of a different game, like
mm,
of the game that you're
yeah,
used
yeah,
to playing, is the one that comes in and out of this town all the time. You are the side quest. What would it be like to play as just a townsfolk?
yeah,
And so I made a whole story and a narrative about it, but I didn't make the gameplay. And then when I took out a complicated chunk from that, I was left with a really hollow Zelda clone. And I was frustrated playing it. So that taught me, and what I'm now going through for everything, I start every game thinking about the gameplay.
yeah,
What is the player doing? I don't give two flips. Like gameplay and that core pillar theme
yeah,
comes first.
yeah,
Story is built from that.
yeah.
And that's how I approach it.
And to be fair, though, that makes sense because, if you can come up with this amazing story, but it doesn't play very well, then
Then you made a book.
you've made a book or you've, made a screenplay.
hmm That's what my
It's
husband tried to make something, and he handed it to me, and I was like, "This is great, but I have no idea how you're going to implement this.
yeah,
I think you should write a book out of this
yeah.
because it's really good. It's just not a game."
It's just and it's that level of interactability. How are you going to keep? Because we play games because we love games, but we also play games because they're really engaging. It's if I want to absorb information, I will open up a random streaming service on the TV.
hmm
I
Exactly.
and that's where gaming kind of has an advantage. If you disagree with me, let me know in the comments. Um, but it's where gaming has an advantage over TV and film because you are making decisions in the story, you are included, and it's interactive and it's engaging and stuff. And I think
I 100% agree.
that's to me that strikes me as a kind of fundamental game design principle actually. That if you're going to make a game and it's going to be narratively driven, you need to think about, well, what is the player going to be doing that's going to make it interesting for them whilst they're navigating your world. If you're going to make a
Exactly.
glorified walking simulator, why is your walking simulator interesting?
And
Um,
for that, I would always tell anybody to go play Gone Home.
yes.
If you want to know how to make something where you're just walking around fun, that is a great,
Mm,
great and wonderful. What would you call that? Not set piece. Case study.
yes. I always point as well. I always think as well. Kind of like slow moving games like Mist as well.
Oh
That are
yeah.
excellent kind of like beautiful games to just kind of like move around in, solve some puzzles, yeah, but just being immersed in those worlds is just, it's
Yeah, a
really
lot
nice.
of good old point and clicks, which I
Yeah,
was inspired by traditional computer point and clicks. So
love that. I'm really glad that we seem to be in a renaissance of point and click adventures at the moment because I grew up playing, probably much like you did, probably growing up on a dodgy Windows 98 PC,
yes, Windows
playing.
95 for a long
Oh,
time.
I was going to say, my first one was a 95,
Yep.
playing these point and click adventure games, and they were so good. I remember playing, the likes of Monkey Island and whatnot,
Just
and they
spending
were just,
hours. Because like the being able to think is to
yeah,
me really that's fun. I
yeah,
mean, I know that's not the same for everybody, but for me, a point and click is great
yeah,
because you think. I mean, yes, you could brute force your way and say like, I'm going to take every item I have and try.
yeah. But actually paying attention to the dialogue and the NPCs and the puzzles and the clues around you is what made those games brilliant. And it's yeah. Um,
Yeah.
so while we're talking about the narrative, you have got, and we've just kind of covered it and stuff. You talked about, we've obviously got a protagonist, then we've got the suits of the minor arcanum, and then obviously your major arcanum, of which there are not a small number. How challenging did you find it to actually create this massively, you know, in-depth cast of characters for the game?
Yeah, there was actually 63 total characters for the game, which is crazy. Each one was individually drawn. Each screen is individually drawn, by the by, when
Wow.
just letting you know. Some elements were caught, like some trees and bushes kind of got copy pasted, but almost everything I opened up a blank canvas and just started drawing.
Mm,
Um, so the characters all just came from, and how did I design the characters? Was all from, I started the game, or started designing the world. First, I started with character sketches. So I sat down and I just wrote out basic personality ideas and I wrote out my main people, like who are the main people for this basic story that I started with. So that was Theo, a rival witch, because you needed like basically a Gary,
yeah,
um, a, a kind soul to balance out that negative soul,
yeah,
or else you would just be undated by negativity.
yeah,
So then I introduced Charlie. Also, as sort of a audience surrogate, Charlie is from not from the Witch Nation, so they get to be the ones to ask the questions like, "Well, why are you doing this?"
yeah,
and be able to get the answers. And then all of the masters. So I went through and I just made like basic personality, ages, your standard
yeah,
design things. But then for all the rest of the people, that all came up by I went through and before even starting the game at all, like drawing anything,
yeah.
I created, I fleshed
Wow.
out every single screen, like how many screens I need,
Yeah,
and what would be on each screen. And so every single area has these little boxes. Each box represents a screen, and
mm,
inside each box I would write an N for like NPC or a B for an NPC that you would battle. And so that then dictated how many. Now, unfortunately, since I wasn't drawing any of them, my poor husband had to draw all 63 and all of their animations.
fine.
So I didn't have to do that, but I just had to basically come up with the characters. And for that,
Yeah,
I just imagined as Theo walking up to a random person, and more or less, I let my mood dictate what the dialogue would be for that person by imagining just a person. Like, well,
yeah,
what would if you just walked up to a kid, what would they say?
yeah,
Probably something silly. So they say something silly. Like fun fact, my favorite character is in Wands. She's the pirate. Her name is Joanna that lives on the dock. Very easy to miss character. She's just my favorite because she's just a silly. She's me. She's just a silly little
yeah.
thing, and I love it.
Oh, that's amazing. Because there are, obviously, would have not finished the game. Um, honesty there. Have not finished the game, but the chunk of it I did play, I was like, there are quite a lot of characters. And then I was sitting there thinking, and the Arcanum is not a small group of individuals cards. They're quite a substantial number. But
Yeah, it's
yeah, that's really interesting.
78. 78. total
Yeah,
cards for a tarot deck.
and you covered the vast majority of them in the game in some way, shape, or form.
Tried to, yeah. Not the minor arcana per se.
Yeah,
So the suits themselves, that is more for the player to explore
yeah,
through menus. But what they represent is explored in every town.
brilliant. Um, Thinking about then, kind of like thinking about the kind of overall kind of like characters, gameplay mechanics, and all that sort of stuff. Um, how did you go about designing the kind of, because there is a variety of puzzles within the game that can be solved using magic. How did you kind of, it's a two-pronged question. How did you go about kind of designing those puzzles, and then where did the idea to kind of solve them with magic come from?
Oof. So unfortunately for the puzzle design, that is not my proudest moment. I truly have to admit that. Um, it's not that the overworld puzzles are an afterthought. That was built in very early on in the game,
Hmm,
like in my game design docs. But it just wasn't anything that I iterated on. I would basically design a single puzzle, be like, okay, air. What can air do? It can push things. Okay. Well, we're not okay, at first this was maybe going to be like an action RPG, sort of like
yeah,
Zelda. So I was originally having the idea of like, okay, well maybe like air and or earth would be things that like you could use to push blocks or boulders. Like you have to unlock that ability first. Um, so it would be both a navigation and a puzzle solving element, just like how Zelda or Link, sorry, Legend of Zelda implements their puzzles. But because when we eventually then stripped that idea out and went instead more for like a mobile friendly slash Steven Universe Save the Light
yeah,
approach where you just click at the end of paths and there's no actual movement on the screen, then suddenly now puzzles just have to literally be blocks.
yeah,
And it went more then into the idea of a point and click. And I didn't want to then implement an inventory menu, but I
yeah.
wanted you, since you are a witch, you should have magic, and the point of the journey for the as the player is to start to learn to practice magic. It's very
Hmm,
Kiki's Delivery Service in that regard. So I wanted you to do magic and to practice it. And the biggest way to implement that then would be obviously tied right back to tarot. So
yeah,
each suit represents an element, and so then if you earn the suit, you earn the ability to use the element. And then I just basically created. It just sort of devolved more to a simple. Okay, how could I block you? A boulder. Well, how would you beat the boulder? You need earth
yeah.
to crack it. And so what I then spent more time on was taking the idea of the mini game, because so what I
Yeah.
decided on instead was you have to solve a mini game to activate your power, and I wanted the mini games to be a reflection of um the suits, because again this whole thing, the whole design pillar is tarot.
Yeah.
So in order to use like air, you would have to avoid negative thoughts because swords, which is the element air,
Yeah.
air is thoughts. So the mini game is just avoiding negative thoughts. For fire is all about action and being reflexive. So you had to like match. It was a rhythm game
Yeah.
essentially. And so I designed them all to be reflective of what the element represents. And then, and this is very subtle, and I don't know if people pick it up, but as the game progresses, the mini games get harder and harder because it's supposed to reflect Theo's mental state. So as
Yeah.
she doubts herself and she's feeling worse and worse about herself, her like the negative thoughts are more
Yeah.
and more and more, so it gets harder and harder to dodge the negative thoughts. It gets harder to act. It gets harder to recognize your emotions. It gets
Yeah.
harder to do all this. So the mini games get harder as the game goes on, and then there's the moment when you like basically after the big climax moment
Yeah.
when you as a player realize that, oh, maybe I am this type of witch instead.
Yeah.
That's when then on the last screen, like the last trail, as you're going back towards the end of the game, every puzzle that you come to, you have to use all four elements, and
Yeah.
every single instance when you go on, it drops down a difficulty level because
Oh
it's supposed
wow.
to mimic you believing in
Yeah.
yourself. So it's not gonna like these. They're no longer. This isn't difficult anymore to like
Yeah.
find the power to summon air.
That's really awesome actually. And I like the fact as well that kind of you say it wasn't necessarily an afterthought. They weren't kind of like, they the puzzles kind of like, shifted and changed and stuff as the game developed and evolved and whatnot. But actually the fact that you've got puzzles that are, you know, completely kind of like locked in with how the narrative is developing, and and your difficulty curve is based on kind of like the character that you're playing as throughout the game and stuff, is a really kind of, it's a nice way to kind of reflect progress actually, and a nice way to kind of reflect as well that kind of the fool's journey, because things do get harder as you go through it, and then you get to that revelationary moment, and then things start to get a little bit easier and whatnot. And that's true of most of the endeavors we do in real life as well, which is also really, really nice.
Yeah, you just got to practice
Yeah,
for to
exactly.
do. I mean, a skill takes practice. Period. Full stop.
Was there a little bit of a like metaphor in there about game design as well from you when you're sitting there going, I've kind of got to have this moment as a game designer. I've got to my all is lost moment of, oh dear God, why am I doing this? And then you come out the other side, you're like, oh, and now it makes sense. Now this bit in Unity makes sense. This horrible piece of C# code that I don't understand. Suddenly I understand what it means.
Yeah, I mean, truly, the to be honest, my biggest challenge in making this game was myself, right? Like my husband was supporting me throughout this, so it's not like I, absolutely had to make or break for the game. It was just
Yeah,
all self-induced.
yeah,
Every time I had a bad day, it was because I would just get really beaten up on doing art, and I would be like, "Oh, I just did like I spent a day doing art. I must have not actually worked.
yeah,
What a bad person." And you're like,
yeah. I've been
what?
I've been productive, but it's not the type of productive that I register in my brain as productive. Therefore, I've done nothing.
I mean,
Yeah,
truly, that's been the hardest shift was being like that typical Western mindset of work, work. Your value is what you do.
yeah, yeah. It's the product rather than the journey and the work that you're putting in. It's the end product, which is it's a problem we have in Western culture. I've got projects that I've worked on, and I sit there at the end of the day and go, I've achieved nothing. I've achieved quite a lot, but in the grand scheme of things, I'm like, nothing has changed.
Nothing. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes, very much so. And so like I actually included a line from the coins master. She tells you, she's like, "Hey, you know, life is not a race to the end. You should probably enjoy instead of looking to more or less," she says, like this is
Yeah.
her direct quote, but the idea is like don't race to the end because the end is death. So maybe instead enjoy this journey that you're on
Yeah.
right now.
And to be fair, that's true to life, because it is, to sound horrifically cliche, it is about the journey, not the destination, as they often say.
I mean, truly, right? If it was the destination, well, we wouldn't be here.
No, we wouldn't. Um, Moving on to think about level design then, because there is some gorgeous level design. And like you say, you've
Thank
designed all of
you.
this stuff yourself, with the kind of like pixel art kind of like design and aesthetic for the game. Um, Kind of another double-barreled question. Um, how did you go about the process of coming up with these kind of variety of binders? Have we kind of touched on it a little bit, kind of like with the idea of the kind of like the kind of the suits, the minor arcanum suits. Um, and were there any particular places in the real world that inspired some of those areas?
Yeah, so the whole game is basically set in Europe, even though I've never been to Europe.
I'm gonna go back through and play the game now and be like, what part? Oh, that's that part of Europe.
Well, so it's not so much Europe. So I began very early on, and we're talking like this is before, and I didn't even draw the towns yet. I barely thought of like what the game is going to even look like. And
Hmm.
I'm so sorry, here we are. I drew a little map, and this map
Oh, that's a pretty
became
map.
more or less my like Bible. I stared at this
Yeah,
throughout the entire development. So the idea was that I wanted to figure out like if I could ground myself in a quote unquote make it real, right?
yeah,
That would help me figure it out. And it truly did. So I designed the land, the general gist where everything's located. And the geographical areas, I wanted a mountainy area, I wanted a valley, I wanted a forest, and I wanted like a beautiful rolling hills.
yeah,
And then from that idea, I then decided, well, it's going to be sort of based off of like, so there's two major groups in history for witches. There was the European witch hunts, and then there was the American witch hunts.
yeah,
So I decided instead of America, because unfortunately I just don't feel any like culture or attachment to America.
Yeah.
Uh, I truly don't think it exists. So I instead went for Europe. It's more stylized, I guess, unfortunately. So I decided to make each town um, based on a vague feel. So
Yeah.
I looked up like traditional Tudor German villages,
Yeah.
and used that as the idea for because it's usually like tucked in woods and stuff, the quaint cottagey like
Yeah.
Grimm's fairy tale. I used that for wands because it was, or sorry, for swords because they're tucked in a forest. For wands, I wanted it to be industrious, and I've always loved the red bricks of Prague. So I just looked
Prague is
at a bunch of
gorgeous.
pictures of Prague and said that's going to be the style.
Yeah.
Prague mixed with Industrial Revolution London
Yeah. So you've
was
got that kind of
the
like that gorgeous Prague architecture mixed with that kind of like Victorian
steam.
Gothic steampunky kind of stuff that we have that was going on in London at the time.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the like factory steamy, but like for this one, obviously because the witches are eco-conscious and hippies, they it's all steam powered. It's not
Yeah.
coal burning. But anyway, so that's based on Prague. Cups is based on a Norwegian fishing village, just because I love the fjords. That
Yeah.
whole landscape is just gorgeous. And so, if you get up towards that area, you'll notice very tall, stark, narrow
Yeah.
mountain design look, and I wanted that to mimic the idea of being in a fjord. And then for the last place, Cups, it's rolling hills and it's agricultural based. And I was like, well, what's the agriculture area of Europe? Oh, it's probably, well, I don't know, but I'm assuming Sicily, for what I know, is like very rolly hill,
Yeah.
agriculturally based. So I'm gonna base it on like old. The idea for cup or sorry coins was that it's an old Sicilian village, so it's the whole village being on top of a hill with
Yeah.
all of the farmland down in the valley around it.
Wow. That's really awesome. I'm gonna go back now and have a look. I'm gonna spend a bit more time in these because it's a gorgeous game. Um, and it is kind of on my list of games to kind of try and get played over the summer, which I've just realized is very
Almost
much
done.
nearly over. It's very much nearly over. By the time this interview comes out, it will be autumn. So yeah, if you're curious about whether I managed to finish this game or not, let
Check
us know
back
in the
in.
comments. Yeah, check back in, put in the comments. Did Riku actually finish the game? Yes, he probably maybe kinda could have done. Ask us in comments and let us know. Next question then is about the implementation and the programming, because obviously we can't talk about games development without talking about the giant, horrible C# monster that sits in the corner, scaring young children and grown-ups alike. How did you kind of, because there's a lot in this game in terms of from a programming perspective. Not only have you got the narrative stuff, but you've got the complex battle systems, and I can only imagine the tables that you have filled with numbers for all the different stats and stuff. I mean, you've already said you didn't go over the top with stats, but just generally to kind of have those tables with stats in them. How did you go about the kind of programming implementation of all of those mechanics in the game, from the battle stuff to the dialogue and the cutscenes to the kind of general kind of the quote unquote basic gameplay mechanics, movement and stuff?
Yeah, goodness. So I started the game. So as I said before, I start with gameplay. So the
Yep.
first thing I did technically was I bought. Do I have the deck? Oh no, it's downstairs, isn't it? It is downstairs. Anyway, I bought a deck. I went out to there's this little place called Building Character in Lancaster, PA. I went out over there and I bought a tarot deck that is like all unicorns.
Nice.
Yeah, I know,
That
right?
sounds so
So
cool.
yeah, right. So I have this deck and it's all unicorns because why not? So but what I first did was I created basically a bunch of Excel spreadsheets. And I let Excel do all the heavy lifting for me so that like all the math was in each cell and all you had to
Yep.
do was just type like that you did something.
Yep.
And so then sorry, Mark is my husband. So my husband and I literally just went outside with a deck. I would hand him like one suit, I'd have the other suit. Like play, we'd flip coins for which majors we'd have.
Yep.
And then we literally just played the game like by
Like
hand, like paper.
tabletop version. Yeah.
Yeah, we played tabletop using an actual, and then we let Excel basically do what the game is going to be doing, like
Yeah.
behind the scenes. I used that, right? So that basically the idea that the Excel sheet was doing all of the math for me,
Mm.
I let that basically just copy paste over into Unity. So I got my PhD. I'm not trying to say that as if it's like I'm smart or anything, because I've definitely know people who did not deserve to get it to go through. Anywho, the but so I taught myself how to program.
Yeah.
I was disillusioned during my postdoc, decided to take a course, taught myself that, then jumped over into web dev, and then took a bunch of Udemy courses essentially to teach myself how to do a video game. And so for the programming, uh, it, so I guess that was all to say I've done like a little bit of programming before I
Yeah.
started this. But I mean, that's what I love the most is to program. Um, I just love programming. It's
The
so much
complete
fun.
opposite of me. I can't.
Oh,
I just
I
like I look at it. I look at Visual Studio and I'm like, just what is this?
so much. It's beautiful. Like the so like I'm used to in science, you spend weeks, if not months, trying to do an experiment to get an
Yep.
answer that you then got to analyze, and then you could look at it and say, crap, I don't know, the stars weren't aligned, so it didn't work. Try it again. With computers, like in
It's
programming, you can just,
instantaneous.
it's instant. You write it, you hit a button, and it does it. And you're like, yes. So
See,
the iterative process is so much shorter.
this is probably where I have a problem then because I type stuff in and I hit the play button and it doesn't work. And I then
Well,
spend
okay.
about 12 hours going, another YouTube tutorial on a slightly different attempt. And I'm like, that's still not working. Okay, next YouTube tutorial on the same thing. That's not working. Why does this not work?
So I actually had a little bit of help. So the battle mechanic,
Hmm,
so as you probably mentioned, the battle was the hardest thing, and so I
yeah,
started with that. That literally took 6 months, 6 full months for me to figure out. Part of that was I took a Udemy course. What one? Which one was it? I can't even remember what it was. It was called Learning to Code Trading Card Battle Game Battle System with Unity 3D. I took this
very
course.
specific title.
Yeah, well, it's basically it was a course on how to build a basic Hearthstone
Oh, wow. Yeah,
mimic. Well, I went through that whole course and just coded along, and then I took the basic implementation of that
hmm,
and then just expanded it to meet my requirements. So then I had to like regut it and tool it towards tarot,
yeah,
and then I had to learn how to add in the visual aspect that obviously Hearthstone doesn't do at all. The whole
yeah,
idea of showing the spirits and the moves and like the Pokemon
yeah.
at half of showing the battle. So yeah, that took 6 months. It was a lot of work, a lot of coding. Two of my scripts for the battles are 1,000 lines each. The one that processes all of the cards is over 1,000 lines, and the one that processes all of the battle, like the moves and the math, that one's over 1,000 lines. Um, I'm pretty sure the total project is probably couple tens of
Yeah.
thousands is my guess of lines of code. It's all C sharp because I did this one in Unity. Um, I don't know what I was trying to get at with this. Oh, it was difficult, but it like wasn't hard.
Yeah,
It
it's
like
one of those kind of it took a while and it was challenging, but it wasn't like soul crushingly difficult.
No, for me,
Yeah,
the soul crushing difficult was the drawing, was just
yeah,
to get the art in order to see things. The thing that would make me so frustrated is I would code something and then be like, well, now I have no art to see whether
yeah,
or not that's working. All I can see is print statements at the bottom of the screen to tell me whether or not this is all
yeah,
working. That was to me the most frustrating thing. Slash getting certain things to work in Unity was really frustrating. I think the biggest thing that helped, and something that I learned from getting my PhD and doing and doing a grad project, was that the in science in general is iterative approach. So
yeah,
basically, instead of taking it as one giant chunk, so instead of saying battle system, make the whole
yeah.
battle system. That's massive. It's so
Just
big.
chunking.
Yes,
Yeah,
chunk. Just do one itty bitty chunk. So say like, okay, I want to go from the overworld screen to the battle screen.
yep,
Goal one. Once you get that in, then the next goal is, can you like summon or like call
yeah,
out your spirits? Next goal, can you pop up a menu? Next goal, can you drag a card? Next goal, can once you drag a card, can it do like how do you process that?
yeah,
And so that's how I build up everything. It looks when you look at the finished code, and my code, I'm going to try really hard for every game once I release it to make the code publicly available because there's no point in me just sitting. Like, I used a lot of resources, as you said, tutorials,
Yeah,
like Udemy. Like, I paid for some with Udemy. I used a lot of online tutorials and a
yeah,
lot of like YouTube tutorials. So in a way to sort of like give back because other people took
yeah.
all that time, um, all of my code is completely available. And if you look at it, it's going to probably look maybe like a nightmare. But when you're doing it, it's not that difficult as long as you try to code A as if you're going to come back to it within 1 month, and B, take it in small steps.
Yeah, and that makes sense though, to be fair. It's I know I've dabbled with Unity and Unreal um for personal projects and stuff, and I often will sit there and be like, I want it to do this. And then, like you say, though, it's that iterative approach. Okay, well, this is quite a complex thing.
Complex.
What are the different steps that I need it to do the big thing? And actually, I think when it comes to, game design and stuff, and just any big potential projects you do in your life, actually, that iterative process is so important. Um,
I
so
agree.
important. Um, and to be fair, like it's really lovely that you're actually planning on kind of making the code publicly accessible because there will be people out there that will be like, oh, okay, I want to do something in a similar vein to Tarot with the kind of, the two-step battle system or, the kind of elemental puzzles that become progressively more challenging as you work through the game. And then once you hit your kind of like resolution point in your narrative, it then becomes slightly easier each time you go down there. There are going to be people out there that want to do that and they're going to, having access to that code is going to be really, really helpful for a lot of people.
Yeah, and so I threw it out there. I mean, it's just the scripts. I mean, I'm not obviously did not it didn't make it in the idea for documentation for true public
Yeah,
exposing API like a good programmer would, but like I just wanted to be sure to like submit my works out there for
yeah,
the creative collective common good
yeah,
because I think that's the point of the internet,
yeah.
is it not?
It is. Put a little bit of love back out in the world.
Yeah, exactly.
Um,
And Unity's hard. I'm gonna say, oh, can I make a quick plug?
oh God, yeah, no, that's the whole point of these interviews. Plug away.
Great. I am so sorry, Unity, but you guys are doing terrible things. Sorry. Okay. Um, Godot is amazing. So
Mm,
this game, Terra Theo's Quest, was done in Unity, and I had a lot of fun learning a typed language, like a static typed language. It was great.
yeah.
I originally learned Python and JavaScript though,
Oh,
so being able to go back to Godot and like having a non-static typed language in my dictionaries and everything else.
yeah.
Guys, Godot's so much better than Unity.
It's really funny. I was talking to
Okay, that's it. That's all I want to say. It's my little
I was
plug.
going to say I was talking to a developer a couple of weeks ago, and they're developing their game in Godot as well. And they've just said that they started working in Unity, and then they opened up Godot, and they started using Godot, and they were like, "Why am I using Unity?"
That
I mean,
was literally my thought.
I'm working, I've for people that are watching this now, it would have been back in August. I was working on a big project right for us right now, for Daniel and I right now. It is August. I was working on a really big project and I was umming and ahhing between whether I'd use Unity or an Unreal. I opened up Unreal and I was like, Blueprint is so easy. I just
Oh,
click thing and I just drag a line and it's like little flow charts
oh,
for
really? Is
your
that how that
code. Oh,
works?
it's so nice.
So it's like a
I opened it
visual
up.
scripting?
It's a complete visual. It's not Visual Studio. You don't have to type. You can type bits of code in. You can obviously, if you want custom stuff and whatnot, you have to go and type C++. But for basic stuff, you just literally just drag little flow charts. And for someone who
Nice.
coding just is, I look at Blueprint. I'm like, this is Riku friendly. This is easy. I drag lines and make boxes.
Oh, if you want to know, for Godot as well, they have a visual scripting language. It's not
Wow.
as robust and can be a little
Yeah.
bit cumbersome compared to just going ahead and writing it. And it's called GD script. It's not quite
Yeah.
Python, but if you want, you could either type Python or they have a visual system.
But I suppose as well, like, there's been a lot of interest, I'm gonna say, around Unity over the last few months and some slightly questionable business decisions they've made. And actually, if more people end up going to use Godot, then that kind of visual scripting language they've got there will probably become something that will be further developed. You think back to where Unity was, you know, 5 to 10 years ago, it was in a completely different state to what it is now, in the fact that it's a lot more accessible and it's a lot easier to do things in there.
Yeah,
So if more people end up using Godot, then you will probably see a similar thing happening.
especially as and if more users specifically try to jump ship from Unity
Yeah,
to the open source Godot.
yeah. And to be fair, I post one of the interviews I've done recently, um, looked at Godot as an engine. I was like, actually, it looks really nice, and you can do stuff in there that looks as good, if not better, than some of the things that you can do in Unity. Not quite to the same scale as Unreal, but
Yeah,
it's Unreal Engine. It's designed to be ray
awesome.
tracing and ridiculously high budget looking and amazing. But as an engine that's accessible and open source and everything else, it's a really good resource. So yeah,
Yeah,
if you're contemplating getting into games design and stuff, not only use some of Daniel's amazing tips, but also go check out Godot, because
yeah, check it out.
it's a really cool little engine.
I
Um,
100% put my power behind it. It's open source, meaning that it's open to the people, instead of being proprietary. And it's if you don't have if you are on a smaller scale, so like I'm probably always going to be in pixel art,
yeah,
small 2D games. That's probably going to be my niche. So turns out that that engine's just perfect for that. But
marvelous.
always choose an engine based on I always choose the tool that's right for your job,
Yeah,
as you just said. Like
yeah,
Unreal's definitely better for other things. Unity actually does have some strengths, so use it for what it's good for.
yeah. Unity is quite nice to create kind of like prototypes and stuff, but it's just whether, yeah, it's just controversies, unfortunately, at the moment, which it happens to everyone, happens to all of them.
It does, it does, it does, it does. The joy of late stage capitalism.
Oh yes. Right, my last two questions then.
Okay.
Because it's been so lovely talking. Honestly, it's been so lovely talking to you about Theo, um, Theo's quest. Last two questions then. Anyone who's a regular viewer of the show will know what they are. They can see them coming a mile away. They're like, oh, he said last two questions. We know what those are going to be. First one is, what have been, because you've mentioned a couple of times that you have been your biggest challenge during this project. What have been some of the other major challenges during the development of this game?
Okay, so me and then drawing. Goodness, drawing was my biggest challenge.
Yeah,
When you are your own artist and you need to do all of the art assets and you're not using a tile map to make it easier on yourself, I mean, I made this hard on myself, literally, but that I don't something for people who are not game developers to know.
yeah,
A game takes a lot of work. I literally put in a year and a half of full-time effort to make a game. A simple, about 5 to 6 hour game.
yeah,
So much art, so much programming, so much everything. The biggest hurdle was basically myself and believing in myself, doing all the art to get it done, to put it into the game, and believing that it's good enough or whatever. And but though to that end, when we were talking about progression, if the first couple areas were the first areas that I did, and instead of going back and making them more beautiful, I
yeah.
left them exactly as they were the first draft. And so what's funny is as you play through the game, the art actually gets better.
But that's quite nice though,
So
because you could have I mean, it's lovely that you've admitted that, but you could have just been like, and it improves, which is reflective
of the fool's journey,
of the full journey. Yeah,
but it is reflect. That's
it
why I
is. Yeah,
left it though. But the truth, like, of really honest methods, for y'all scientists out there, is that I did it because I just didn't exactly want to iterate on it, and also just to literally as a proof for myself, like to say, look how far I got. Like when you
yeah.
are on this screen, it looks really flat. By the time you get to the end, everything is like shaded and there's a lot more color, and I'm really started to explore, and it looks great.
Amazing.
Um,
Honestly, this has probably moved to top of my list of games that I need to get done over the remnant of August, of which there at time of recording there is about 2 weeks left.
oh
Um,
yeah, sorry, of August. Sorry, I thought
yeah,
you meant 2 weeks worth of games.
I've got a lot more than 2 weeks worth of games to play.
Okay.
Um,
And the last thing for art, or sorry, for things that were difficult, I would have to say, and I'm sure every dev that you've interviewed has told you this, marketing.
yeah, it's the time and time again. Every dev says the same thing. Be it
Just get
small studios or like yourself, solo devs, just marketing is so rough.
it's very hard. I just got a thing today. My YouTube decided to my account for my trailer was spam. So now I've got to go figure that out. But yeah, it's just getting your voice out there. It's like I want to support like itch and stuff, but it's hard to get notice for itch. The sales difference between itch and Steam is night and day,
Mm,
unfortunately. Um, it's definitely
yeah,
it's definitely hard. But the good news is for anybody out there, like once you get a game and it's done and it's out there, like you've got a product.
yeah,
You've got a revenue stream. It's there. It's in the world. So
and that's the thing, isn't it? It's once it's live on something like the Steam store, unless it's something so egregiously terrible that it breaks all of Steam's terms of services and whatnot, um, it's never gonna go away until you make the decision to pull it.
exactly.
So
And so be proud of it, have it out there, and then it's hard, but my job, my take marketing essentially is just being me. That seems to have gone halfway decently well. I keep up a Twitter presence. Um, I have a website. That's about it. I try to stay clear of negativity, so I don't
yeah.
really do Reddit and Instagram and I don't like Meta, so I don't support them. So I don't have that. But you do what you do.
Look,
Do what you need to do.
yeah, gotcha. And and like you say, it's like game dev and choosing engines and programming language and all these other things. There's not a one size fits all. It's what works best for you as an individual or studio and stuff. That's really, really excellent advice, to be fair, especially when it comes to marketing, because everyone we have on the show always says one of the biggest challenges is marketing. Um,
So hard.
oh God, yeah, no, I couldn't. The
Oh,
thought of it
in-person
makes me
stuff.
want to cry.
Sorry, one last piece of advice. In person. So I did we were able to do a Pride event. We had a table, and that generated a lot of sales. And just being able to do something person
Yeah,
local made a huge difference. So, like, if you got any sort of event that could be local, where you could get in front of a person and just literally say, "Hi, I'm a human being, and I made this," really helps.
yeah, and I think there's definitely more of a. I don't know what it's like for you over in the States, but for us in the UK, I was at Develop back in July, which is like a big conference, games industry conference in the UK. Um, and it was just so nice to be there amongst all of these people. And there was everything from like huge AAA studio people. The legend that is John Ramiro was there, right the way
Oh,
through to
wow.
down. I know I was a little bit starstruck. I'm not gonna lie.
Did you get to meet
Um,
him?
I sat in on one of his talks. It was very nice. It was very exciting. He was talking about Wolfenstein 3D, and the man was just riotously funny. Um, but you had people like that, and like Arcane and Epic and Unity and whatnot, and then you also had on the other end of the spectrum there was like a small area where you had just like small little solo or dual indie studio developers that were just like, and this is the game I have made, and look at my game, and that was like some of the best fun I had while I was at Develop, sitting there and playing some of these little like indie games and stuff. So
Yeah,
yeah, that's definitely
it's
sage advice.
definitely get if you can get out there. I know for a lot of people, and especially if you're a queer developer, and it can be very difficult, especially if you are of a group that is traditionally attacked and you don't feel
Yeah,
safe, to put yourself physically out there. But having that ability can be really safe, and so like, or it can be really helpful. So if you can find a safe space, so like a Pride event or something, that's a great way to get
oh,
out there.
absolutely. And everyone who watches the channel knows that you know we have a very high queer representation here at Robot Republic. I'm even
Yay.
repping my progressive pride t-shirt right now for this interview. Um, which you can buy on our merch store. Casual plug. Um, it is, pride events are, if you're a queer person, they are like the safest you're ever going to feel. You know,
I that was one of my first. I did one long time ago when I was in Arkansas. This was one of my first to go back to, and oh, the joy. I'm about to cry. The joy I had felt for being in there is something that I haven't been able to feel for a very long time.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah, that's fine. I've been the
Just
same.
got really emotional.
No, but they are though. Pride events are so important to us as a queer community. They are so important. And a lot of people do wonder why, and it's because we don't have to worry about literally anything. We can just have a good time and not care
Care.
about being yelled at, screamed at, shouted at, or anything like that, regardless. And you don't, I've gone to pride events with some of my straight friends, who are superb allies, and they are just amazing. And if you can use that, if you're a small indie developer and you are queer and you want to go to a pride event, then show off your game, then bloody well do it.
Do it.
Because us gamers with a Y love that shit.
And it's witchy, so hey, I mean,
Oh, exactly.
if you intersect everything, man, more people were interested in the tarot than they were like, because we had physical decks.
Yeah,
More people were interested in that than they were the game. Like almost everybody wanted the deck. Nobody cared about the game.
love it. Absolutely love it. Final question then, Daniel, before we wrap things up, is what is
Yes.
next for both Theo's Quest and any potential future projects that you are contemplating?
So Theo's quest is done. Yay. For Appas Papas, us, it's the studio is just my husband and I. So
Yeah,
that's and Appa is our puppy, just to let everybody know that's why we're called Appas Papas. So for Appas Papas, Theo's quest was our first thing and it's done. And in general, our belief, like our philosophy as a company
yeah,
is that we want to release polished games, meaning that when the game is released, think back to like the back when it was everything was cartridges.
yeah.
There was no such thing as patches, so I'm trying real hard to when I release a game, it's done. So Theo's Quest is done as it is. There might be some game-breaking bugs, and if somebody discovers it, I will try to fix it and stuff. Um, and I have no intention right now of making another like a Theo's Quest 2. I've actually had some people literally reach out to request it, which was so that felt great as a creator
Yeah,
for somebody to
definitely.
be like, "This is great, I want more," and it's like, "I'm so sorry," but that's the end of Theo's story. But my husband and I were talking about it, and we are thinking about maybe, potentially, sort of making a Appas Papas multi like universe, like not
Ooh,
cinematic universe, but I guess
yeah,
game universe. So our we are in development already of our next title. It's called Spirit Charmer. It's going to be very it's shocking going to be another Pokemon like game. This one's going to be a little bit closer to Pokemon, but I am adding some more like a whole another two stats and a whole other layer because I'm wanting to go on this question of like well, what if you play Pokemon but you aren't able to keep a team? So in this game, yeah, you have spirits. Spirits are broken in. Your types are emotions. This is where empathy comes in, and using moves will basically use up the spirit's essence, their life force, and as that gets once that gets used up, the spirits move on, like to the next plane,
yeah.
and you lose your team member. So you're going to have to be constantly recruiting. I'm not going to be calling it catching. You'll be constantly recruiting spirits to join your team, ask them for help blah blah blah, blah, and you're playing as Appa. And we have a grand idea of maybe making the third game be, since I love my RPGs, be a more like JRPG sort of style,
Yeah,
and having your party members be one might be Theo in her later
yeah.
years, one might be Appa, one might be a new character, and we'll just start expanding out, sort of like a universe that includes might and magic and
Oh, that sounds amazing.
trying to be good people.
Yeah, that sounds so cool. And with the Spiritfarer game, um, do keep in touch because we'll definitely have you back on the show to talk about that when you're kind of further into development of that because that sounds really cool. Um,
Thanks. It'll be a while. We
oh
just
yeah, no,
started it.
obviously, I'm not
I'm in
expecting an
prototype.
email I was gonna say I'm not expecting an email in a couple of months' time going, so the game's ready.
Yeah, we're in prototype right now. I just got the battle system. Like I said, I switched to Godot, so I'm having to relearn all
Yeah,
of this stuff. So, but obviously much faster already. Within 1 month, I'm gonna more or less have the prototype done. Well, a month and a half to two.
Fantastic.
Yeah, right. So
That
some
sounds
6 to
brilliant.
2, so much faster.
Um, Final thing then, where can the lovely people watching this find more information about Appa's Papas and Theo and updates on future games? I mean, obviously, right now, down in the description, there is a link to the Steam page with Theo's Quest on it. If you want to go and check that out and do download it because it is a really, really good game.
And
Um,
there's a demo on itch. So
exactly, and
yeah, so if you
you
want to
know,
try it out for free, go to itch. Unfortunately, it's not for Steam. Um, don't tell Steam that. So the you can find me at our website is Appas Papas APPASPAPAS .com. We've also got a Twitter handle at Appas Papas, and where I tweet pretty much every day of the week, roughly. I mean, not weekends, because I take
no, it's a Monday to Friday job.
yeah Monday through
Yeah,
Friday. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Like I decided to stop the rat race so that I could be with my family. So um so you can find us there. You can find us on the website. There's also the Steam page that you mentioned, as well as if you want to support a smaller site, we've got or sorry, a more independent site, we've got itch.io. It's appaspapas.itch.io.
Awesome. And I will make sure that all of those links are going to be down in the description for the lovely people right now as well.
Beautiful.
If you have played Theo's Quest, please do let us know down in the comments below. What were your favorite characters? Because there are so many of them and they're all so cool. Let us know in the comments below what your favorite characters were, what your favorite parts of the game were.
Yeah.
Um,
What was
and
your
if you do,
favorite spirit type?
yes,
I
what is your
spent I had
favorite
a
spirit
lot of
type?
fun drawing those because each spirit is tied to what the card is representing and then what the element of the spirit is supposed to be.
Fantastic. But
So
yeah, let us know in the comments because that would be really amazing. And we'd love to know. And obviously, Daniel will be able to see it as well because you'll be able to check the video out because it's going to be obviously live now for the people of YouTube land. Um, and yeah, do let us know. Daniel, it's been such a pleasure having you on the show. Honestly, it's been an absolute riot. I've loved having to chat, being able to chat to you about this amazing game.
I had a great time. Thank you so much, Riku.
Oh, thank you. And to the lovely people viewing, please do hit that like button if you enjoyed this video. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon so you get notified of all of our new content.
Smash it.
Daniel, thank you so much. Yes, smash that bell icon. I
Smash
just
it.
dislodged my fringe doing that. It was very aggressive. I apologize.
That's the level
That is the
of
level of
umph
enthusiasm.
you need to be hitting that button with. Undo the
Daniel,
fringe.
oh, brilliant. Daniel, it's been amazing having you on the show. And thank you for watching, everyone, and we'll see you next time. Bye, guys.
Bye.